As you saw in part 1 of our SOLIDWORKS Utilities CAD-CAS, SOLIDWORKS Utilities is basically a set of tools that do various operations needed for your day-to-day CAD work or to speed up your day-to-day CAD work. So we'll continue that in part 2 to take a look at some of the great tools available in SOLIDWORKS Utilities. So let's get started. The next utility to take a look at is the Find and Replace Annotation utility. And like most find and replace in Word type documents or other Office type documents, it basically just looks for text and gives you the option to replace that text with a different string. So we'll jump into SOLIDWORKS here and take a look. Like most utilities, it's located under Tools, Find, and then Find and Replace Annotation. And it launches up in the Property Manager. Just to show you an example, I have a few notes here where instead of writing THRU, I've written the full word out. So I want to go ahead and say find that text and replace it with the through, THRU, uppercase. There's a few options to notice here. I can have it search different types of annotations, so just notes, just balloons, or at the bottom here I can say select all annotations and search for any type of the acceptable annotations in here. I can also do things like match the whole word or match cases, so if it's case sensitive I can include that, and if there's any hidden annotations I can include those as well. So after I run it, very quick, it finds a text. I can choose replace just to replace the specific instance of it, or I can hit replace all and it'll go through and replace every one of these, and you can see within a few seconds it comes up, replaces all those, and comes up with a message. So that's the find and replace annotation. One thing to note here on the side is it can also find like symbols, but you need to know that symbol code or the syntax. So an example here is the diameter symbol is the mod diameter text. So if you wanted to replace the diameter with a different symbol or just remove it altogether, you can go through and replace that. The next utility to take a look at is the Find/Modify utility. What this does is it searches the features in the tree of a part based on parameters you input, and then allows you to change those results or modify those results of the search either in a batch mode or a one-by-one type environment. So let's jump into SOLIDWORKS and take a look at that. To launch this utility, like most, go to Tools, Find/Modify, and then Find/Modify Features. Once open, you can see you can search by different types of features. So for example, if I wanted to find cuts that are just cut extrudes based on specific type parameters, so maybe it has a through all depth, I can do that. If I wanted to go a direction 2, I can do that. What I've found easiest is if you have a similar feature is just clicking that instead. So in this case, if I just click this boss extrude, you'll see that it's already set the category and the feature type for me. In fact, if I go and edit the parameters of this search, you'll see it's actually got the blind depth that I put into this specific feature. So it's already filled out a lot of this for me. If for some reason you're looking for extrudes that are larger or smaller than this, instead of this little equals symbol here, you can click on it like it's a button to switch between greater than, less than, and equal to. So if you don't have a similar feature, you're still able to do a search. You just have to type in some of the parameters manually. I'll go ahead and click Find Now, and it's found the 2 boss extrudes that match those parameters exactly. If I want to edit these, I can just go in here down to the Modify section, and then I can get those same parameters back. And if I wanted to say make this 1.5, I click OK, and then I can say Modify All, Modify Selected. So if I just wanted to do 1 or 2 of the results, I could do that. I can Control Select these results as well. I'm just going to do a Modify All, and we'll see them jump to a little bit bigger size now. Again, there's a lot of ways to use this tool, and it can search for a lot of things, but it can be very helpful. The last thing I want to mention in this tool is once you've selected a feature, you can actually do a volume tolerance. So if I wanted to find all the features that are close to that or within 1% volume of that feature, or that cut or whatever it may be, I can search for those as well and it'll populate the list on there. So that's the Find Modify utility in SOLIDWORKS Utilities. Another great utility in SOLIDWORKS Utilities is the Geometry Analysis tool. And this will scan your part for various geometry scenarios that may cause issues down the line. So let's take a look at how this works. The Geometry Analysis tool can be found underneath the Tools pull-down menu, or in most cases by default it's on the Evaluate tab of the Command Manager. Once you enable it, you'll see in the Property Manager here the different types of checks it's able to do for you. Now keep in mind this doesn't change anything, it's just analyzing your model for this type of geometry, and you're able to set that tolerance or that level that it's looking for under each one of these categories. I'll go ahead and hit calculate, and you'll see what happens here is it gives me a list. It returns me a list of all the different checks it found and any things that violate those checks. So in this case we can see I have some sliver faces in here, and what you do is when you click on it you'll see a graphical preview. You get a tag out there in space. So for example, I'll just go ahead and zoom in on the point of this tag here, and you'll see that it's finding this little small sliver face. So this can be a very useful tool to find or spot potential problems down the line. As mentioned before, it can help with CAM packages possibly where there's a small face that's not machinable, or FEA where you're going to have to put a really small mesh on this face. Now it doesn't fix anything, as I mentioned. It basically just shows you where those areas are. It's a pointer tool. Again, you can save a report very similar to the other tools as well, and you can make some changes up here and recalculate if need be. The next utility to take a look at is the Power Select utility. This utility is just a selection tool. So once you run the utility, select the specific entities you chose based on the criteria you defined, and close the utility, the items remain selected or highlighted for you to do whatever operations you want to do on them. So for example, if you search for all the fillets and you close the utility, those will be highlighted and you can suppress them all. So let's take a look at how this works. Like most utilities, you go to Tools, Power Select, get the properties over here in the task pane. You'll notice that I'm able to search for edges, loops, faces, and features. So let's just say we want to search for those fillets. I'll just pick feature type from the list, and you'll notice there's a lot of extensive lists of what you can do, and based on what you pick up here there's issues down or lists down here as well. So I want to search for all the fillets in this part. If I hit search, you'll see that it found all these fillets. And if I close this tool, you'll see that they remain selected. Notice the feature tree has them highlighted and out in the graphics area. So if my goal was to just suppress all these at once or change the color of them at once, they're all highlighted right now and I can do that operation. So remember, it's just a select tool. Let's run that again. And this time I'm going to say, show me all the fillets that have a face color of red. And notice it's still got fillets highlighted, so it's important to pay attention to what's checked, because you only see one of those criteria below this box depending on what you highlight in the parameters section up here. So if I run that search, you'll see that it found the fillet with a feature color of red. You'll notice it did not find this one fillet that was defined by a face color of red. If I wanted to do a new search, I could add faces to the list and search that way, and you'll see now it finds that one fillet as well. Again, when I close this, it remains highlighted for whatever operations I choose to do. And that's the Power Select utility in SOLIDWORKS Utilities. Another great utility in SOLIDWORKS Utilities is the Simplified Tool. And this essentially analyzes your model for small or negligible features and allows you to suppress or create simplified versions of those models. So let's go ahead and take a look in SOLIDWORKS how this works. Like most, you go to Tools, Find, Modify, and Simplify. So it's not its own section and maybe a little bit out of place underneath the Find, Modify. I'm just going to go ahead and let it select all the different types here and choose Find Now. And you can see that it's found a fillet and a cut extrude and several other small negligible features. Down here at the bottom, I can select all and suppress or do them one by one. So if there was some that I definitely wanted to keep, I can keep those. You also have the option to create a derived configuration. So it'll actually create a new configuration for you that you just use for maybe your FEA studies or your analysis in SOLIDWORKS simulation. This will also work on the assembly level. You can do this, run the same utility, and it'll go down through every part and find these items and then create a derived configuration if you choose to. One thing that you may find useful is if you hover over the simplification factor, it's going to give you a little bit of background of what that factor is. Also, if you hover over the feature parameter, it explains how they use this simplification or what algorithm it's using. Same with volume based. You'll get this tooltip that describes how that is. So I encourage you all to read that and figure out what the best parameters for you to simplify are based off of. And that's the Simplified tool. Keep in mind if it does create the derived configuration, it just calls it simplify underscore whatever the name of the existing configuration was. The thickness analysis utility is really cool for plastic parts or thin-walled parts where you're trying to make sure you know the exact thickness or find areas that can potentially fail in your designs. Let's jump into SOLIDWORKS and take a look at this. If I go to Tools, you'll notice down here at the bottom I have the thickness analysis tool. And this could also be located on the Evaluate toolbar. It launches up in the Property Manager, and there's only a few options to really pay attention to. And that is if you do the Show Thin Regions, so I'm going to show the thin regions anything 0.25 inches or below. When I hit Calculate, you'll see it analyzes the model, and then it gives me a nice graph here of anything at 0.25 inches or less. Anything above that we can see is in this blue color. And I can actually come in here and edit the color and change that if I want to. I can also come in here and choose more of a discrete type graphics where it's very level in the changes instead of a smooth or a continuous type graphics. If you choose Show Thick Regions, you can actually analyze specific values in between. So I'm looking at the stuff that's now above 0.25 but below 0.5 inches. So you'll see that I can analyze that based on thick or thin regions in here. This is also very useful if you just want a specific face. You can search the faces for just the thickness on that face. And that's a thickness analysis utility. Very useful for possibly plastic or thin-walled type parts. The Symmetry check utility is a really cool tool to figure out if your parts are symmetrical. A lot of times you build these large assemblies where you think it's symmetrical, but it really isn't, and you won't find that until later on down the line you missed a part or missed a component. First we'll take a look at it in SOLIDWORKS on the part level. And you'll notice just based off of this look that this part looks very much like it's symmetrical. Underneath Tools, we can run Symmetry Check, or on the Evaluate tab of the Command Manager. I have to pick a plane. So what's neat about this is I can pick a specific plane, or if, for example, I do not have a plane, I can pick two parallel faces. So I'll go ahead and select these two faces. And this will actually, if I create a check here, this will actually create a plane for me in the tree. So you'll see that I now have a new plane in there. And it says which faces are symmetrical and which faces are not. In this case, everything is symmetrical. I do not have any asymmetrical or unique faces. Go ahead and cancel that. And I'm going to switch it to a configuration where I do have something different. It looks from the view in the graphics area, it looks like it should be correct, or everything is good for me. I'll go ahead and run that same command again. And this time I can just pick a single plane and run the check, and you'll see that when it's done, I can see some different colors now. It says this face and the back face, side A and B, are unique faces. They do not match up. So something is different between those two faces. Now I'll let you know a secret is I changed the hole size, but I made a very small difference, maybe a millimeter difference, and that's why it's finding it. It's also saying that those faces are symmetrical and the asymmetrical face. So along that plane of symmetry, the surface area of this side of the face is different than the surface area of this side because the holes are different sizes. So it makes sense. You're able to also save this report out. So let's take a look at it on an assembly level. You'll notice this assembly looks very symmetrical about this right plane. So I'll go ahead and run a symmetry check. And we'll check it, and you'll see that there's actually some asymmetrical parts in here. You'll notice it's the part that crosses the plane, so that component isn't the same component on the other side. So you're always going to get some asymmetrical if it's a component that crosses the plane of symmetry we're checking. But you also notice that there's three other parts here, these socket button head cap screws. They're on the bottom side, so I'll just rotate this slightly to give you an idea. So this is a good example of where you might have thought you had symmetry, but because you missed a small bolt or something, you don't actually have that symmetry in there. So what this is doing is checking the components on one side of the plane of symmetry versus the components on the other side of the plane of symmetry. And basically what I did is I did this as a pattern. So you'll see, if I can zoom in here, if I rotate this, you can see these don't match up. So you might be thinking that this component and this component are the same thing, but because the orientation isn't the same, it doesn't know what to do, or it doesn't match it up. So I would actually have to line these hex heads to make these not think they're different parts, or make sure that they're in the same alignment. Otherwise, they could be different components, or they could be oriented differently, and the symmetry wouldn't be the same based on the angle of those hex head cuts. So this is a good analysis. Again, you can save a report out of this if you like. And that's the symmetry tool, or symmetry check tool. Our final utility is the report manager. And this is just a tool to manage all the reports you've saved out of other utilities in SOLIDWORKS utilities. So as you can see, the compare tools, the de-analysis tools, and the symmetry check tools all have the ability to save out a report. Jump into SOLIDWORKS and take a look at this. If I go to Tools, Compare, you'll see the Report Manager. Not sure why it's under Compare, but that's where they put it. Again, you can always search for it in the command search. And then what I can do is I can browse to a specific location on my computer where reports are located. So if I was saving all those reports to a specific spot, I can run it. You can sort by date and other things to see the latest reports. And then if you click, for example, the geometry compare or geometry compare tool and hit view, you'll see it'll bring up the report for you, so you don't have to browse to those directories. So if you have a common area where you always put your reports, you can save out that information and view those reports later on. So that's the report manager. Okay, that was SOLIDWORKS Utilities. So you saw some great tools in both Part 1 and Part 2 of this CAD-CAST series. And SOLIDWORKS Utilities in general is what I consider an underused add-in. It has some great tools in it. It can automate some of the tasks that you've been doing manually, and hopefully just make your day-to-day CAD life a lot easier. So don't forget, all these tools exist as you continue to work in SOLIDWORKS. And don't forget to use SOLIDWORKS Utilities. Thank you for viewing this Digital Dimensions CAD cast. Please visit us at www.ddicad.com.